Hello. My name is Jones, and today we are going to look at parasuicide and the grieving process. The objective of this lesson is to define parasuicide or attempted suicide, is to explain significant losses that may lead to grieving, to explain the stages of the grieving process, discuss the specific management of the clients whilst they are admitted in the wards. Okay, so those are some of the objectives of this lesson. By definition, parasuicide or attempted suicide is a deliberate undertaken act of self-harm with the intention to commit suicide but does not result in death. So parasuicide, one attempts to commit suicide but it does not result in death. Okay, so in discussing the grieving process, it's important that we appreciate significant losses that may lead to grieving. Okay, so it is also important that we know that grieving is a natural response to loss. It is an emotional suffering that one suffers or feels when something or someone they loved most is taken away from them by death or that person moving to a different place. The more significant the loss, the more intense the grief may be. Okay, you may associate grieving with the death of a loved one, but it is often the cause of grief on most occasions. So any loss, be it a human being or be it a thing that a person treasures most, may result in some form of grief or may cause grief. Okay, so mostly we associate grief or grieving to a loss of a human being, but grief may come also due to other losses. So, apart from death of a loved one, grieving may come because of divorce or loss of a relationship. You've been dating and then the relationship abruptly comes to an end. This will lead to grieving. You have had good health and then you have loss in your health function or loss of health. You may suffer some kind of grief. Loss of a job, knowing that each and every month now you'll not be getting a salary like it used to be, may bring some form of grief. So losing a job brings about grief. Then loss of financial stability. You want talk time, you already have the money, you can buy. You want pizza, you can easily buy, but now you do not have money. So you may enter into some kind of grief. You've been longing to have a child, and then midway of pregnancy, you lose the pregnancy. This will lead to some form of grief, or it will lead to grieving. Though I can also look at retirement as one of the things that may lead to grieving because of the detachment with the people that you enjoyed working with. Then you have to retire, meaning you will no longer be working with these people that you had treasured the most. Then with retirement, the worries also that comes. Your retirement package being given 10 years after, 15 years after, may make you have some worries and pass through some grieving. Okay, so retirement can be a good thing in order for you to enjoy the fruits of your years of labor. But due to poor policies in some government, you find that after you retire, you are treated as nothing in society. Even when you call for you to get your pension, you find that you do not get your pension. So that is why someone may experience some kind of grief. There are times we are attached to our pets, and a loss of a pet will then result in some form of grief or result in grieving. Okay, there can also be issues of serious illness within the family or of a loved one. This will also lead to some grieving process. Loss of just friendship, okay, someone you are attached to, someone you share with, problems that you have, may lead to some grief. Loss of safety after trauma, okay, loss of a limb, okay, loss of a body parts, illnesses like cancer will make someone go into some form of grief. Loss of a body organ I can give is maybe uterus due to fibroids and the like. So one who has not reached satisfied parity, or someone who has not reached the satisfied number of children, may face some kind of grief. Okay, so these are some of the things that may cause grieving. Now let us look at the stages of grieving. There are simpler ways that we can look at these stages of grieving. Mostly it is the acronym of DABDA. Okay, so there are simpler ways which you can look, but there is also a comprehensive way of looking at the grieving process. So in the grieving process, in a simpler way, denial is refusing the results. Person may say or utter statement like, "This can't happen to me. I'm a prayer warrior. I'm a child of God. This cannot happen to me." So the key phrase here is, "This can't happen to me," in the denial stage, as the patient or client is in shock. Then we move on to anger. So under anger, the statement that the client may utter is, "Why is this happening to me? Who is to blame?" So in anger, you ask the question of why and who. Then we move on to beginning. In beginning, some phrases that can be uttered by the person that is passing through this is, "Make this not happen, and in return I will." So I will do wonderful things, like you try to bargain with the Most High or the supernatural being. Okay, so being a Christian, I'm saying you try to bargain, to make agreement with God, that if you recover from this illness, you will be an evangelist, you'll be a pastor, you'll be paying 20% or 50% of your offering to the church because you want God to heal you. So under bargaining, you make a statement like, "Make this not to happen, and in return I will do ABC." If it does not go as planned, then we can proceed on and have the next stage, which is depression. In depression, Patient is too sad to do anything. Patient becomes mute and withdrawn. So sentiments like "I'm too sad to do anything" can be uttered in the depression stage. Then there is the acceptance stage. In the acceptance stage, one may utter statements like "I'm at peace with what has just happened." Okay, so it's important we appreciate Kubler-Ross grieving stages in this simplified manner. But otherwise, to add more stake to it, denial may be expanded, and also anger can also be expanded. So stage 1, denial. In this denial, according to Kubler-Ross, grieving is an overwhelming emotion. It is not unusual to respond to the intense and often sudden feelings by pretending the loss or change that it is not happening. So, in denial, denying gives you time to more gradually absorb the news and begin to process it. Okay, this is a common defense mechanism, and it will help you to numb the intensity of the situation. As you move out of this denial stage, however, the emotion you have been hiding will begin to rise. You'll be confronted with a lot of sorrow that you were initially denying. This is also part of the journey of grief, and it is very, very difficult. Some examples that we can give in denial stages to do with breakup or divorce, job loss, death of loved ones, or terminal illness diagnosis. Okay, so for breakup or divorce, some of the things that may show that one is in denial is to do with a divorce. You will say they are just upset. This will be over tomorrow. Where people decide, like as couples, the other one sleeps on the floor, the other one sleeps on the bed. So you might think it will just happen for the night because the other partner is just upset, thinking tomorrow you'll get back to be on the same bed. So in breakup or divorce, this may signify denial. Of course, I'm not saying you're supposed to divorce right there and then. These may be natural problems that you may encounter in a marriage, where the other one decides to sleep in another room and not to sleep with you in the same bed, or decide to sleep out because of the problems of confrontations that you are having. So you may take it that the other partner is just upset. Tomorrow it will be well. And it may be something that might have been happening for some time. But unfortunately, one time or at one point, it may end up in divorce. An example that we can give to do with the denial and job loss is that when you're given a dismissal letter because of a certain thing that might have happened, you may say they are mistaken. They will call me tomorrow to say that they need me. So you are in denial despite being given a dismissal letter, but the institution that you were working for with all your heart can dismiss you in such a manner So you may feel they will do an investigation and come back to their senses. But this would have been the end of your job, or the final termination of your contract. Then, to do with the death of loved one, denial characteristics that we can see is that one may say, she's not gone. She'll come around the corner anytime, any second. In a hospital setup, you might have to do prolonged resuscitation, thinking that your loved one will eventually come, but looking at the time that has elapsed, this person has completely gone. So that is to do with the death of loved ones. Okay. Then termination of illness or diagnosis. Here, one who is in denial stage may utter statement like, this isn't happening to me. The results are wrong. After being given a diagnosis of a terminal illness, mostly in denial, you say these must be wrong results, or this is not happening. Okay, then stage 2 of the grieving process by Kubler-Ross has to do with anger. So where denial may be considered a coping mechanism, anger is a masking effect. Anger is hiding many of the emotions and pain that one is carrying. This anger may be redirected at other people, such as the person who has died, the ex, or your old boss. You may even aim your anger at inanimate objects. Okay, so nurses mostly have ended up being objects of this anger by patients who are suffering, and you see a lot of condemnation of nursing activities or services, because patients would want things done right there and then. They are supposed to take a drug at 14 hours, as a nurse you bring 10 minutes late, 20 minutes late. The projection will be that they are not recovering because nurses don't give them drugs on time. Okay, because of the anger associated with illness. So while your rational brain knows the object of your anger, you know that the person that you're trying to blame so much is not the person to blame. But your feelings, okay, at that moment are so intense to feel that that person is to blame. Anger may mask itself in feelings like bitterness, or some may linger here and there. As the anger subsides, however, you may begin to think more rationally about what is happening and feel that emotions have gotten the best of you. So at this stage, you may try to push them aside. That's why it's important to know the stages within grieving that we pass through. So some examples to do with anger under breakup or divorce, job loss, death of loved one, or terminal illness can be given in this way. So for breakup or divorce, to show that one is experiencing the stage of anger, statements that can be uttered include, I hate him, he will regret leaving me. Okay, so this can be said out of anger. And out of anger, we have told people that we love that we hate them. Okay, and said they will regret leaving you. But maybe they are not regretting. They have left you and they have found a better relationship. Anyway, all relationships have challenges. There's no perfect relationship. So, to do with breakup or divorce, such statements like "I hate him," regrets leaving me can be uttered. Then, to do with job loss, statements like "They are terrible bosses. I hope they fail with their project." When you say these out of anger about your bosses, it is part of the normal process of grieving according to Kubler-Ross. So you say you had terrible bosses and they will fail, so move on with the project. Then other characteristics that show anger to do with death of loved ones is that you see statements like, "If she cared for herself more, this would not have happened." So we say these out of anger, sometimes to do with death of our loved ones. We have lost our loved ones sometimes in hospitals. I would consider they have tried their best, but a certain drug or a certain element was not there. So statement like, "If this drug was there, it would have saved the patient." Or, "If the patient was taken fast to theater to correct the surgical problem that was there, the patient would have survived." So out of anger, such statements can be passed or can be said. Then terminal illness diagnosis. In terminal illness diagnosis, out of anger, we can say, "God, where are you? I've worshipped you every Sunday or every Saturday. Now I am sick. God, why have you forsaken me?" So out of anger, we may say, "Where is God in all this? Why am I suffering? How dare you, God or Lord, you have let this happen?" Out of anger, we may show bitterness with the supernatural being that is supposed to help us within this situation. So where is God now that I'm suffering? The God that I've worshipped every day. How dare you, God or Lord, let me suffer like this when I have been praying and fasting all the time? So these may be said out of anger, where one expresses bitterness with the supernatural being that they are neglecting them. Then stage 3 is bargaining. During grief, you may feel vulnerable and helpless. In those moments of intense emotions, it's not uncommon to look for ways to regain control or to want to feel like you can affect the outcome of an event. In the beginning stage of grief, you may find yourself creating a lot of "what if" and "if only" statements. It is also not uncommon for religious individuals to try to make a deal or promise to God or a higher power in return for healing or relief from the grief and pain that they may be going through. Beginning is a line of defense against the emotions of grief. It helps an individual to postpone the sadness, confusion, or the hate that they may be facing. Some examples of beginning to do with breakup or divorce, job loss, or death of loved ones, or terminal illness can be to do with breakup or divorce. One, statements that you may hear include, if only I had spent more time with her, she would have stayed. So this may happen in bargaining to do with breakup of divorce. If only I did not sleep on the floor that day when we were angry, if only we talked about it, it would not have ended in divorce. If only I never used to check that phone every day and see the problems that are there that have led to this divorce, then this divorce would not have come through. Okay, so the issue of who checks on the phone, or whatever you check on the phone, may find certain things that are a bit insensitive and may lead to divorce. Okay, there's other issue of every messages that come, you show each other as partners, and there are some people out there who are insensitive with the message that they share and may lead to quarrels as to why you're discussing such things, and then you have a divorce. Then to do with bargaining, to do with job loss, statements like, if only I worked more weekends, they would have seen how valuable I am. If only they allowed me to work for more months, they would have seen my contribution and how valuable I am. Unfortunately, the job is gone. So in bargaining, you would have wished for more time so that they would have kept you. But the situation is not as you would want it to be. Then to do with death of a loved one, in bargaining, statements like, if only I had called her that night, she wouldn't be gone. If only I had called her that night. There are instances where one would want to say, today I will not just go to this place, and then afterwards they make the decision to go, then something bad happens. Then in bargaining you say, oh, if only this did not happen, then this unfortunate incident would not have happened or would not have occurred. Then to do with terminal illness and diagnosis, statement like, if only we had gone to the doctor sooner, we could have stopped this. We find that a lot of people suffer from diseases at home and try to treat themselves, and then by the time they are going to the hospital, they are in cancer stage 4, and they tell them, no, this cannot be treated. We find they are in cancer stage 3. So in bargaining, you look at it, say, if I had only gone to the doctor soon, this would have been averted. Then there is a stage 4, depression, according to Kubler-Ross, stages of grieving. And it's also important that we know that these stages is not that they will follow these chains. They can come either way when one is facing a loss. So it's very, very important. But otherwise, depression, whereas anger and bargaining can feel very active, depression may feel like a quiet stage of grief. In the early stages of loss, you may be running from the emotions, trying to stay a step ahead of them. But by these points, however, of depression, you may be able to embrace and work through them in a more healthful manner. You may also choose to isolate yourself from others in order to fully cope with your loss. So this is a person who is now going into some depression as part of the grieving process. Okay, so depression does not necessarily mean that it is easy or well defined. Like the other stages of grief, depression can be very difficult and messy. It can feel overwhelming, Patients may feel foggy, heavy, and confused. Depression may feel like inevitable landing point for any loss. However, if you feel stuck, you can't seem to move past this stage of grief, you may need help from a mental health expert, a therapist that can help you work through this period of grieving or coping. For example, to do with breakup or divorce, statements like, why go on at all? Why moving on at all? So these can be statements of depression. To do with job loss, I don't know how to go forward from here. You have lost this job, you start another job, you have lost that job, then what's the reason of applying? Why should I move on from this stage? Then death of a loved one, statements like, what am I without her? What am I without him? So these can be statements of depression. Then to do with terminal illness, my whole life has come to a terrible end. So these are statements of depression. Then the last stage of grieving process, according to Kubler-Ross, is that of acceptance. Acceptance is not necessarily a happy or uplifting stage of grief. It doesn't mean you have moved past the grief or loss. It does, however, mean that you have accepted it and have come to understand what it means in your life now. You may feel very different in this stage. That's entirely expected. You have had a major change in your life, and that would depend on the way you feel about the many things that you feel you have achieved. Look to acceptance as a way to see that there may be more good days than bad days, but there may still be a bad day, and that is okay. To do with breakup or divorce, statements like, ultimately, this was a healthy choice for me. Ultimately, the divorce has helped me to move on in life and become a better person. Ultimately, the divorce has helped me to find a far much better partner than the one who used to abuse me. So, this is acceptance of the previously ending divorce, or feel like divorce has allowed you to be more free to do things than when you are in a relationship. Then to do with job loss, acceptance can be expressed in statements like, I will be able to find a way forward from here and start a new path. We have seen people engaging in entrepreneurial activities after a job loss, and they will attribute and say, had it not been for that job loss, I would not have been doing this business. Anyway, don't look for such a reason for you to start a business. Each and every person may be the CEO of their own lives and better their lives than depending on a salary. Salary is an enslavement that takes away your precious time to build yourself. So, to do with job loss, acceptance is that you will say, because of that job loss, I'm now started a new path, and it has allowed you to start a new path. Then to do with death of a loved one, you may utter statements like, I'm so unfortunate to have had so many wonderful years with him, and he will always be in my memories. That is acceptance. Acceptance of relationship that was bad, then you say, wow, I'm happy to have learned all bad things about a relationship that I had previously. But now I wish for better characteristics in my next relationship. Then to do with terminal illness or diagnosis, statements like, I have the opportunity to tie things up and make sure I get to do what I want in my final weeks or months. When you know that your situation or predicament is that bad, you may start to tell God that, please, Lord, I know I might have sinned against you in many of the things that I might have been doing. Now that I've reached the epilogue of my life, Lord, please, I ask forgiveness of my sins, and may I have that opportunity to be amongst the chosen one. So that is to do with terminal illness and diagnosis. Okay, so in our lesson today we are looking at parasuicide and grieving process. And grieving process, as I'm teaching it, sometimes makes me to start grieving. Anyway, let's move on to look at types of suicide. Emily Dickin classified different types of suicide on the basis of different types of relationship between the actor and the society. He came up with following types of suicide, that is egoistic suicide, altruistic suicide, anomic suicide, and fatalistic suicide. By egoistic suicide, according to Dickin, when a man becomes socially isolated or feels that he has no place in society, he destroys himself. This is the suicide of self-centered person who lacks altruistic feelings and is usually cut off from mainstream of society. Self-centered person who lack altruistic feelings. Okay, who decides to cut off himself from the mainstream of society. Then altruistic suicide. This is a type of suicide that occurs when an individual and the group are too close and intimate. This kind of suicide results from the over-integration of an individual into social proof. Okay, so altruistic suicide. Okay, then anomic suicide. This type of suicide that is due to certain breakdown of social equilibrium, such as suicide after bankruptcy or after winning a lottery. Then one starts, losing a lot of money. So society tend to laugh at you that, wow, you had 1 million, you had 10 million, but now you have become bankrupt. So in other words, anomic suicide takes place in a situation which has cropped up suddenly. Then fatalistic suicide is a type of suicide that is due to overregulation in society. Under the overregulation of society, when a servant or a slave commits suicide, when a barren woman commits suicide, it is an example of fatalistic suicide. Okay, so Mary Dickin classified different types of suicide on the basis of different types of relationship between the actor and society. So in egoistic, you relate actor and the society. So in egoistic, we're saying become socially isolated person who commits suicide. In altruistic suicide, individual and group are too close and intimate. In anomic suicide, it's due to certain breakdown of social equilibrium, social status. Then fatalistic suicide due to over-regulation in society. Okay, so let us now discuss some specific management of clients with parasuicide whilst they are in our care in the wards. So there can be creation of an environment that is safe, and this can be achieved through removing of potentially harmful objects from clients' access, okay, like sharp objects, belts, okay, glass items, and even alcohol. And as I'm talking about alcohol, I say it with a lot of sorry. In as much as we have a lot of people that enjoy alcohol, there are certain things that come from drinking alcohol. Okay, the hopelessness sometimes that may come from drinking alcohol. The mental illnesses that come sometimes from drinking alcohol. Okay, so for creating a safe environment for the clients, we are saying even alcohol, for those that abuse alcohol, should be removed from their environment through counseling, so that they stop abusing alcohol. Okay, so someone with parasuicide, most of the time you find situation when a person is being taken in cells, they say remove the belt. It's because they can use that belt to commit suicide. So that is one reason. Of course, they may have their own reasons as to why, but I'm relating it to this as a mental health practitioner. Then supervise closely during meals and medication administration. Also, this will help us in creating a safe environment, because taking a lot of drugs, if drugs are within the environment, can be one of the ways they would want to take their lives. So creating a safe environment is cardinal in preventing suicide for someone who is parasuicidal. Then the other item that can be performed or done is cognitive behavioral therapy. In order to change the mindset and also be able to elicit the problems which the person is undergoing, cognitive therapy, cognition is important. Cognition, cognitive behavioral therapy. So debilitating physical illness, okay, debilitating physical illness that may affect client's self-image should be assessed, and direct questions can be asked to the patient. Are you planning to harm yourself? Are you planning to commit suicide even after this failed suicide? If so, you can ask, what is your plan? Do you have any other means or ways that you want to carry out this plan? It will give you information on other things that you need to remove within the environment. Because just having naked cables can make someone commit suicide by touching the positive and the negative wire. Okay, then that is to do with cognitive therapy. Then there is the psychological care aspect. Here, a contract can be signed. So there is a verbal contract that is signed or that is entered in. Okay, and these mostly are short term. Or you can have a written contract with the patient. This psychological care is a bit different from the psychological care when you're talking of medicine, medical conditions. So when you're talking about psychological conditions or psychiatric condition, you can talk about psychological care or contract that is signed, especially to do with this suicide or someone who is parasuicidal. Okay, so when the time is up for this contract, you can make another one. This is to help secure a promise that the client will not seek to do anything concerning suicide until we see that we achieve that which we have agreed within the contract. So the patient will have developed some goals that will help them to achieve and put their mind off the meditation or for them to commit suicide. Then observation. Observation to do with parasuicide and the likes. You have to maintain close observation of the clients, provide one-to-one contact, give a constant visual observation, and you can give every 15 minutes check on the clients. You have to know that the patient who come with parasuicidal condition will come in as an emergency. So the issue of airway, breathing, circulation will come in. So if a 15 minutes periodic check will help depending on how stable the patient has come in the hospital. You can place in a room close to the nurse's duty room. This is for regular observation. And do not do irregular interval kind of check on the patient, but have an irregular time of checking which is frequent, so that the patient will not say after 5 minutes this one will pass through, so let me do this quickly. So have an irregular schedule. Then you can be checking on the patients throughout your shifts or throughout hospitalization. Okay, so patients sometimes may learn your predictable times of checking on them, like during drug administration and likes, but have that so that in case they further want to finish their suicidal mission, you can easily do your emergency care and resuscitate them and remove the danger from them. Then the other part to do with parasuicidal care in the ward has to do with information for family and friends. You have to be a good listener and supportive. Let the family members and friends know that there is a lot that can be done psychologically for the patients to come out of these parasuicidal thoughts. You can stress on the importance of that person within the family and the changes that they can help to bring if they are supported. And you may allow a person present to the clients to be around them so that they can assist them with some of the things that they may need. You can show love and encouragement as family members to the clients and also as the staffs. You should not be judgmental or show anger towards them or provoke guilty feeling. Okay, so as this will further heighten the feeling or the thoughts of accomplishing their suicidal mission. You need to take any hint of suicide seriously when the patient has been admitted with parasuicide. Okay, so let us talk about prevention of suicide in our community, in our society. So we can prevent suicide through decrease of availability of lethal weapons like guns. Unfortunately, we cannot prevent people in our communities from using knives and axes, but otherwise these have been used in suicide or parasuicidal attempts. The other ways of preventing suicide is limitation on the sale and availability of alcohol and drugs. Okay, so drugs here, to be specific, are some of those that can easily be used for suicidal missions. Then increased public and professional awareness about depression and suicide will also help prevent the happening of suicide within the family. If you are a believer on psychological care, there is increasing prayers, okay, because others will view suicide thing to be something that psychologically may land within the family. Then the other ways of preventing suicide is community-based crisis intervention. Having clinics that do with crisis intervention will help limit suicide, as it will help people to have hope of having a solution to their problems. Stigma may cause suicide, so in preventing suicide, campaign to decrease stigma that is associated with psychiatric care. If the client continues to express suicidal feeling, then we can have some immediate needs for the clients of providing a close one-to-one observation as a way of preventing suicide, and also developing a contract that we have talked about, verbal or written. And then throughout our society, we need to improve our teaching about problem solving to the community and clients who survive parasuicide, so that in case they face such challenges in their lives, they should know how best to move around such problems and be able to solve those problems. So problem solving skills, assertiveness can help prevent suicide in our community. There you have it. Today we have been looking at the condition, parasuicide, and a grieving process. In our discussion, we have looked at the definition of parasuicide or attempted suicide. We have looked at the grieving process. We have explained the significant losses that may lead to grieving. We have stated stages of grieving process, discussed the specific management of clients with parasuicide. Our definition of attempted suicide is a deliberate undertaking act of self-harm with intention to take one's own life, but does not result in death. Sui, that is one side killing, silly, so killing self. We have explained the significant losses that may lead to grieving. Grieving, in as much as may be looked at to do with a person, loss of a person, it can also be because of loss of other things that person was attached to. A job, okay, marriage, a pet, and the likes. We studied the stages of grieving process, which is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. We first explained in simple ways some phrases that are common in denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Then further on went on to explain in detail what happens in stage 1, denial, and gave example to do with breakup or divorce, job loss, or death of loved ones, or terminal illness. In the same fashion, we discussed under anger, we discussed under depression, and also under acceptance. Then we went on to look at types of suicide, and if you want a way of remembering these, you can always come up with a mnemonic. Okay, can always come up with a mnemonic, and you'll be able to remember these stages. Then on management of the patients with suicide whilst in the ward, we have talked about cognitive therapy, where you're asking direct questions so that you can develop a care plan to prevent suicide. Psychological care, apart from the explaining the suicide process, okay, to the patient, so that suicide process to do with whatever might have happened, you can have a contract, okay? You can have a contract with the patient, which can be verbal or written, so that you develop objectives that you can achieve. Observations can follow. Then information for family and friends should also be given to prevent further episodes of suicide by the person affected. Then we have talked about prevention of suicide. So when you're talking about prevention of suicide, you have to look at some of the things that may cause suicide. When you look at those things that may cause suicide and how best you can prevent them, then you prevent suicide. Okay, like the loss of job or employment, this one can be avoided through empowerment, so that the one does not end up being bankrupt. Okay, so in the care, we also appreciated that assertiveness can help prevent suicide and should be taught to the patients. Okay, so problem solving also should be taught to the patient to prevent suicide, and also should be included in the care. Okay, so from me, I'm saying thank you and keep studying.